The fluorescent lights above the conference room felt like spotlights burning into my skin, as Marcus Blackwell's voice cut through the air like a blade. Time seemed to stretch impossibly thin, as I watched his mouth form words that would change everything between us forever. The leather portfolio in my hands grew slick with perspiration, while 23 pairs of eyes locked onto me, waiting to witness what they assumed would be my professional execution. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced to the room filled with our biggest clients from Technovate Industries, his voice dripping with the kind of authority that comes from inherited privilege. This is exactly why we can't have junior staff leading presentations on accounts this significant. Some people simply don't have the breeding for high-stakes business. The air conditioning hummed in the background, but the room felt suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears as Marcus continued his calculated assassination of my character. Natasha here comes from a very different background than our usual account executives. Sometimes that working-class mentality shows through in ways that might make our distinguished clients uncomfortable. My fingernails pressed deep crescents into my palms beneath the conference table as I processed the deliberate cruelty of his words. This wasn't just professional criticism. This was character assassination designed to humiliate me in front of the most important people in our industry. The Technovate executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, unsure whether to look at me or away from the spectacle Marcus was orchestrating. "I think what Miss Blackwell means to say," interrupted James Morrison, our CFO, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was heading, "is that we have different approaches to client relations here at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions." Marcus held up a hand to silence James, his steel gray eyes never leaving my face. "No, James. Let me be crystal clear about what I mean." He leaned back in his chair with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the power in the room. "Natasha Rivera may work hard, but there's a difference between effort and excellence. There's a difference between ambition and actual capability. Our clients deserve representatives who understand their world, who speak their language naturally." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but something cold and calculating was simultaneously settling in my chest. After 3 years of working under Marcus Blackwell, after building Pinnacle's most successful campaigns, after personally securing 4 of their top 10 accounts, this was how he chose to define my work. I carefully closed the presentation folder that contained the campaign proposal I'd spent 6 months perfecting. The proposal that would have secured Pinnacle Marketing Solutions the largest contract in the company's history. The proposal that Marcus was now dismissing along with my professional credibility in front of everyone who mattered in our industry. "Thank you for that clarification, Marcus," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I stood slowly, maintaining eye contact with him, while every instinct screamed at me to flee from this humiliation. "I appreciate you finally being honest about how you really see my contributions to this company." The Technovate executives looked mortified. Sarah Chen, their chief marketing officer, actually winced at Marcus's behavior. These were people who had specifically requested to work with me after seeing my previous campaigns, and now they were witnessing their preferred account executive being publicly degraded by her own boss. "Natasha, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately," suggested Elena Vasquez, one of our senior partners, clearly recognizing that Marcus had crossed a line that could damage the company's reputation. But Marcus wasn't finished. The alcohol from lunch was making him bolder, more reckless with his words. "No, Elena, I think our clients should understand exactly who they're working with. Natasha may have some creative ideas, but let's be realistic about her limitations. This is $100 million account. We need someone with the right pedigree to handle relationships at this level." The word pedigree hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Marcus Blackwell, whose corner office was decorated with photos of him shaking hands with politicians and celebrities, whose Harvard MBA hung prominently behind his desk, whose family connections had secured him the CEO position at 28, was reducing my decade of industry experience to a matter of social class. I gathered my materials with deliberate precision, my movements controlled and dignified despite the chaos in my mind. "I understand completely, Marcus." Message received. I turned to address the Technovate team directly. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez, Patterson, it's been a pleasure working with your team over the past 6 months. I hope you'll understand that I can no longer in good conscience recommend Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for your campaign needs." Marcus's face went pale. "Natasha, you're overreacting. Sit down. We're not finished here." "Actually we are. I tucked my portfolio under my arm and headed toward the door. Completely finished, the walk from the conference room to my office felt like traversing a minefield. Every colleague I passed seemed to sense that something seismic had just occurred, but none of them knew the full extent of what Marcus had unleashed. They didn't know that his public humiliation had just triggered consequences that would reshape not just my career but the entire landscape of our industry. My assistant, Priya Patel, was waiting by my desk with wide, concerned eyes. "Natasha, what happened in there?" Marcus stormed out looking furious, "And the Technovate people are asking for your direct contact information." I sat down at my desk and pulled out my personal phone, the one I used for my other business interests. "Priya, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it quietly and quickly." She nodded, sensing the gravity of the situation. "Whatever you need. Contact our legal department and request copies of all my employment contracts, performance reviews, and documentation of client acquisitions I've personally secured. I want everything sent to my personal email within the hour." Priya's eyebrows shot up. "Are you?" "Also," I continued, scrolling through my contacts to find a number I rarely use during business hours, "clear my calendar for the rest of the day. Cancel all meetings, reschedule anything urgent for next week, and if anyone asks where I am, tell them I'm following up on the Technovate situation." What Priya didn't know, what Marcus certainly didn't know, and what only 3 people in the entire company were aware of, was that Natasha Rivera had more power in this situation than anyone realized. What they didn't know was that the working-class girl Marcus had just publicly humiliated in front of Denver's most influential business leaders was actually the majority shareholder of Apex Strategic Holdings. Apex Strategic Holdings, the investment firm that owned 67% of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. As I dialed the number for my private attorney, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Growing up in East Denver, the daughter of a mechanic and a night shift nurse, I'd learned early that respect was something you earned, not something you inherited. I'd worked 3 jobs to put myself through the University of Colorado, graduating summa cum laude with degrees in both marketing and business administration. But more importantly, I'd learned to listen. While my wealthier classmates were networking at exclusive parties I couldn't afford to attend, I was observing. I was learning how money really moved, how deals really got made, and how power was actually distributed in the business world. By the time I graduated, I'd identified 7 small marketing firms that were struggling financially but had solid client bases and talented teams. Using a combination of student loans, small business grants, and money I'd saved from years of working multiple jobs, I'd quietly begun acquiring minority stakes in these companies. The strategy was simple: buy low, improve operations, merge synergistically, and reinvest profits into acquiring larger stakes. Within 5 years, those 7 small firms had become Apex Strategic Holdings, a privately held investment company specializing in marketing and advertising acquisition. When Pinnacle Marketing Solutions hit financial difficulties 3 years ago, Apex had swooped in as a white knight investor. Marcus Blackwell and his board had been so relieved to avoid bankruptcy that they'd barely scrutinized the terms of the investment. They'd accepted Apex's capital injection in exchange for majority ownership, assuming they were dealing with some anonymous group of Wall Street investors. They never suspected that their savior was a 29-year-old woman from East Denver who had applied for a senior account executive position at their company just 6 months later. "Rodriguez Law Firm, this is Maria speaking." "Maria, this is Natasha Rivera. I need to speak with Patricia immediately. It's urgent." "Of course, Ms. Rivera. Let me get her right away." While I waited for Patricia Rodriguez, my attorney and one of the 3 people who knew about my ownership of Pinnacle, I opened my laptop and began reviewing financial documents I'd been monitoring for months. Marcus's leadership had been questionable at best, but I'd been content to let him run the day-to-day operations while I focused on growing the business from within. That was about to change. "Natasha, what's wrong? You sound upset." Patricia's voice carried the warmth of someone who'd been both my attorney and friend for over 6 years. "Patricia, remember those contingency plans we discussed regarding my position at Pinnacle? The ones we hoped we'd never need to use?" There was a pause. "The hostile takeover scenario. Please tell me Marcus didn't." "He did, in front of clients, in front of staff, and in the most humiliating way possible." I quickly recounted the conference room incident, watching through my office window as Marcus paced in his corner office, apparently on a heated phone call. "That idiot," Patricia muttered. "He just handed you the perfect justification for removing him. How do you want to proceed?" I'd been asking myself that same question for the past 20 minutes, and now I had my answer. "I want to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." As majority shareholder of Apex Strategic Holdings, I'm invoking our right to review current leadership performance and make necessary changes. Natasha, are you sure? Once you reveal your identity, there's no going back. Your days of flying under the radar are over. Through my office window, I could see Marcus gesturing animatedly, probably trying to do damage control with other clients or board members. He looked confident, secure in his position, completely unaware that his world was about to shift beneath his feet. I'm sure Marcus made this personal when he decided to attack my character publicly. He questioned my breeding, my pedigree, my right to represent this company to clients. Well, tomorrow he's going to learn exactly who he was really talking to. I'll draft the necessary documents tonight. Emergency board meeting, tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll have everything ready. After hanging up with Patricia, I sat back in my chair and allowed myself a moment to process what I'd just set in motion. For 3 years, I'd played the role of the dedicated employee, the hard-working account executive who'd risen through the ranks. I'd submitted to Marcus's micromanagement, endured his condescending comments about my background, and watched him take credit for campaigns I'd conceptualized and executed. I'd told myself it was strategic patience, that building the company from within while maintaining my anonymity as its owner was the smart play.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
That proving myself through merit alone, without revealing my actual power, would ultimately be more satisfying. But Marcus had just proven that some people will never see past their prejudices, no matter how much you achieve or how much value you create. He'd shown me that to him, I would always be the working-class girl who didn't belong in his world. Tomorrow he would discover that his world actually belonged to me. My phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel Blackwell, Marcus's nephew and one of our junior executives. Daniel was nothing like his uncle, genuine, hard-working, and one of the few people at Pinnacle who'd never made me feel like I had to justify my presence. Heard what happened in the meeting. Are you okay? Uncle Marcus was completely out of line. I stared at the message for a long moment. Daniel didn't know about Apex, didn't know about my real position in the company. To him I was just a colleague who'd been unfairly treated by his family member. His concern was genuine, and that made what I was about to do more complicated. Because when I removed Marcus from power, Daniel would inevitably be caught in the aftermath. I typed back, I'm fine, don't worry about me, but you might want to start updating your resume. Things are going to change around here. Before he could respond, I powered down my computer and gathered my personal belongings. Tomorrow would bring revelations that would shock everyone at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Tonight I needed to prepare for the most important board meeting of my career. As I walked past Marcus's office on my way to the elevators, I could see him through his glass door, still on the phone, still gesticulating with the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. I paused for just a moment, long enough for our eyes to meet through the glass. He glared at me with the dismissive contempt of someone who thought he'd just put an uppity employee in her place. I smiled back with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that by this time tomorrow he'd be cleaning out that corner office. The elevator doors closed, and I descended toward the parking garage where my modest Honda Civic waited. Marcus had once made a snide comment about my car, suggesting that successful executives should drive vehicles that reflected their status. Tomorrow he'd learn that real power doesn't need to be displayed on a bumper sticker. As I drove through downtown Denver toward my loft in Lodo, I reflected on the strange turns life can take. This morning I'd been Natasha Rivera, senior account executive, working to prove herself worthy of respect in Marcus Blackwell's company. By tomorrow evening, I'd be Natasha Rivera, CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, having removed the man who'd spent 3 years undermining me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had always accused me of not understanding the rules of his world. Tomorrow he'd discover that I hadn't just learned his rules, I'd rewritten them entirely. My phone rang as I pulled into my building's parking garage. The caller ID showed Sarah Chen from Technovate Industries. Ms. Rivera, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I got your number from your assistant. Not at all, Sarah. What can I do for you? I wanted to apologize for what happened in that meeting today. Marcus Blackwell's behavior was completely inappropriate, and frankly it's made our team question whether we want to work with Pinnacle at all. I smiled as I rode the elevator up to my apartment. I appreciate that, Sarah, but don't worry about Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. I have a feeling their leadership situation is about to improve dramatically. What do you mean? Let's just say that tomorrow's board meeting should resolve a lot of the cultural issues that have been holding the company back. There was a pause. Natasha, is there something you're not telling me? Because if you're planning to start your own firm, Technovate would be very interested in following you wherever you land. As the elevator reached the 20th floor and I walked toward my apartment, I considered how to respond. Sarah, I promise you that within 24 hours, you'll have a much better understanding of exactly who you've been working with all these months. After hanging up, I stood on my balcony looking out over the Denver skyline, watching the lights twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, Marcus Blackwell was probably having dinner at some exclusive restaurant, celebrating what he thought was his victory over an employee who'd gotten too big for her britches. He had no idea that his celebration was premature. Tomorrow would bring revelations that would reshape everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and who really controlled the company he'd been running. Tomorrow the working-class girl he'd humiliated would reveal herself as the person who'd been signing his paychecks all along. But tonight I needed to prepare for the performance of my career, because tomorrow's board meeting wouldn't just be about removing Marcus from power, it would be about stepping fully into my own. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Pinnacle Marketing Solutions headquarters, as I arrived at 7:30, 90 minutes before the emergency board meeting that would change everything. The building felt different somehow, as if the very walls were holding their breath in anticipation of what was about to unfold. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night reviewing financial documents, legal precedents, and corporate governance protocols with Patricia Rodriguez over secure video calls. Every detail had to be perfect, every argument bulletproof. Marcus Blackwell might be arrogant and prejudiced, but he wasn't stupid, and he certainly wasn't going to surrender his position without a fight. The security guard, Miguel, greeted me with his usual warm smile as I badged into the building. "Morning, Ms. Rivera. You're here early today." "Big day ahead, Miguel. Important meetings." If only he knew just how important. In less than 2 hours, Miguel would be working for a completely different company under completely different leadership. The friendly efficiency he'd shown me for 3 years would suddenly make perfect sense to everyone who'd wondered why the night security supervisor always seemed to go out of his way to accommodate my unusual working hours. The elevator rode silently to the executive floor, where the morning stillness felt almost sacred. In 3 hours, these hallways would be buzzing with the aftermath of corporate revolution, but for now they belonged to me and my thoughts. I made my way to the conference room, where yesterday's humiliation had occurred, the scene of Marcus's carefully orchestrated character assassination. The morning cleaning crew had reset everything perfectly: polished table, aligned chairs, fresh water glasses at each place set. No trace remained of yesterday's toxic display, except for the memory burned into my consciousness. Patricia had arrived ahead of me, her legal team already setting up documents and presentation materials at the far end of the table. She looked up as I entered, her expression mixing professional confidence with personal concern. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of our 6-year friendship alongside her professional obligation. "Focused," I replied, taking a seat at what had been Marcus's preferred spot at the head of the table. "Everything ready, all documents prepared and verified. Board notifications sent at midnight as required by corporate bylaws." Marcus received his copy at 6 this morning, giving him the mandatory 3-hour notice for emergency meetings involving leadership review. Patricia slid a thick folder across the table. Financial performance analyses, client satisfaction reports, employee retention statistics, and a comprehensive review of strategic decisions made under current leadership. "The numbers don't lie, Natasha. Even without yesterday's incident, you'd have grounds for this action." I opened the folder and scanned the executive summary. Marcus's leadership had been mediocre at best, coasting on the company's established reputation while making increasingly poor strategic decisions. Client satisfaction scores had dropped 12% over the past 18 months. 3 major accounts had terminated their contracts early, citing concerns about account management and creative direction. Employee turnover in senior positions had reached 35%, well above industry averages. Most damaging of all were the missed opportunity. 2 major acquisitions that could have doubled the company's market share had been abandoned because Marcus couldn't see past his own limited vision of what the company should become. Innovation had stagnated as he'd focused more on maintaining his social status than driving business growth. "The board members should start arriving in about 20 minutes, Patricia continued. "Elena Vasquez and James Morrison are already aware something significant is happening, given the emergency nature of the meeting. Thomas Wu flew in from San Francisco this morning. Margaret Foster is driving down from Boulder." I nodded, mentally reviewing what I knew about each board member. Elena Vasquez, our senior partner, was sharp and business-focused. She'd been growing increasingly frustrated with Marcus's leadership style, especially his tendency to make unilateral decisions without consulting the board. James Morrison, our CFO, was numbers-driven and pragmatic. He'd supported the Apex Strategic Holdings investment 3 years ago, because the financial projections had been undeniable. Thomas Wu represented our West Coast interests, and had been pushing for more aggressive expansion into tech sector marketing. Margaret Foster brought decades of advertising experience, and had been instrumental in building relationships with our legacy clients. All four were professionals who cared more about results than politics. Marcus, however, would not be alone. As CEO and board chair, he'd have support from his allies, particularly David Blackwell, his older brother who served as the company's chief creative officer despite questionable creative credentials, and Sandra Mills, the VP of operations whose position depended entirely on Marcus's patronage. What about Daniel? I asked, thinking about Marcus's nephew and the text message he'd sent yesterday. Patricia consulted her notes. Daniel isn't on the board, so he won't be in the meeting, but given his family connection, this is going to hit him hard. Are you prepared for that? I considered the question carefully. Daniel Blackwell had been nothing but professional and kind during my time at Pinnacle. He'd earned his junior executive position through genuine merit, not family connections, and he'd never participated in his uncle's condescending treatment of me. In many ways he was exactly the kind of employee the company needed more of, but corporate revolutions inevitably created casualties among the innocent, as well as the guilty. Daniel will have to make his own choices about his future here, I said finally. I won't punish him for his uncle's behavior, but I also can't protect him from the consequences of what's about to happen. At 8:15, Elena Vasquez arrived, her usual no-nonsense demeanor heightened by curiosity about the emergency meeting. She paused when she saw me sitting at the head of the conference table, her eyebrows raising slightly at the presumption. Natasha, I wasn't expecting to see you here. This is a board meeting. Yes, it is, I replied evenly, and I have some things to share with the board this morning. Elena took her usual seat, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Does this have something to do with yesterday's incident with Marcus? Because I want you to know that several of us were very disturbed by his behavior. Before I could respond, James Morrison entered, followed closely by Thomas Wu and Margaret Foster. The morning energy in the room shifted as each board member registered my presence and began connecting dots they didn't yet fully understand.
Good morning, everyone, I said as they settled into their seats. Thank you for accommodating this emergency meeting on short notice. Margaret Foster, ever direct, cut straight to the heart of the matter. Natasha, while we all appreciate your dedication to the company, I'm not sure why you're leading a board meeting. Where's Marcus? As if summoned by her question, Marcus Blackwell swept into the conference room with his characteristic theatrical flair, flanked by his brother David and Sandra Mills. His face darkened when he saw me occupying his usual position at the head of the table. What exactly is going on here? Marcus demanded, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used when trying to intimidate subordinates. Natasha, you're not supposed to be in this meeting. I remained seated, my hands folded calmly on the table in front of me. Actually, Marcus, I have every right to be here. In fact, I called this meeting. The confusion in the room was palpable. Board members exchanged glances while Marcus's face flushed with indignation. You called this meeting. You're a senior account executive. You don't have the authority to call board meeting. Patricia Rodriguez stood from her position at the side of the room, her legal credentials immediately commanding attention. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, Miss Rivera does have that authority. Patricia Rodriguez, representing Apex Strategic Holdings. As majority shareholder of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, Apex Strategic Holdings has invoked its right to call an emergency review of current leadership performance. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as each board member processed this information, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to dawning comprehension. Marcus's face went through an entire spectrum of emotions: disbelief, anger, and finally, a growing fear as he began to understand the implication. That's impossible, Marcus said, his voice losing some of its commanding presence. Apex Strategic Holdings is an investment firm from back east. They never. He trailed off as he realized he actually knew very little about the company that had saved his business 3 years ago. Apex Strategic Holdings is indeed an investment firm, I said, standing slowly and walking to the presentation screen at the front of the room. But they're not from back east. They're based right here in Denver, founded 8 years ago by a University of Colorado graduate who saw opportunities in the marketing sector that others were overlooking. I clicked the remote, and the screen displayed Apex Strategic Holdings' corporate structure, including ownership percentages and voting rights. As you can see, Apex currently owns 67% of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, acquired through the capital investment that prevented the company's bankruptcy 3 years ago. Elena Vasquez leaned forward, studying the documents with the sharp attention of someone connecting previously unrelated pieces of information. The investment that Marcus negotiated to save the company. That's correct, an investment that was structured very favorably for Apex Strategic Holdings, giving us not just majority ownership but also specific rights regarding leadership oversight and strategic direction. Thomas Wu, still processing the revelation, asked the obvious question, and who exactly owns Apex Strategic Holdings? I clicked the next slide, which displayed the ownership structure of Apex itself. At the top of the organizational chart was a single name, Natasha C. Rivera, founder and CEO. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and whispered conversation. Marcus stared at the screen as if looking at something that couldn't possibly exist. His brother David actually laughed, a nervous sound that suggested he thought this might be some kind of elaborate joke. This is ridiculous, Marcus finally managed. Natasha is a marketing executive. She drives a Honda Civic. For God's sake, she doesn't own a multi-million-dollar investment firm. I turned to face him directly, allowing myself the satisfaction of watching his certainty crumble in real time. You're absolutely right that I drive a Honda Civic, Marcus. It's reliable, efficient, and paid for. Unlike some people in this room, I don't feel the need to display my wealth through material possessions. Patricia stepped forward, distributing folders to each board member. You'll find comprehensive documentation of Rivera's ownership of Apex Strategic Holdings, including corporate filings, tax records, and banking documentation. Everything has been independently verified by Morrison, Keating and Associates, the same accounting firm that handles Pinnacle's annual audit. James Morrison, as CFO, immediately began reviewing the financial documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades analyzing corporate structures. These numbers, the capital injection 3 years ago, this is legitimate, completely legitimate, Patricia confirmed. Rivera founded Apex Strategic Holdings with a combination of personal savings, small business loans, and strategic acquisitions of undervalued marketing firms. Over 8 years, she built it into one of the region's most successful investment companies, specializing in marketing and advertising acquisitions. Margaret Foster looked up from her folder, her expression shifting from skepticism to something approaching admiration. Natasha, you've been working here for 3 years while secretly owning the company. Not secretly, I corrected. Privately. There's a significant difference. I disclosed my ownership to the appropriate legal and financial authorities as required by law. I simply chose not to make it public knowledge within the company. Marcus finally found his voice again, though it carried a desperate edge that hadn't been there minutes earlier. Why? Why work as an employee in your own company? What kind of game have you been playing? I clicked the next slide, which displayed Pinnacle's performance metrics over the past 3 years. I wanted to understand this company from the ground up before making any major change. I wanted to see how it operated, how decisions were made, how employees were treated, and most importantly, what kind of leadership was really in place. The metrics painted a clear picture. Revenue growth had been minimal despite a booming marketing industry. Client retention had declined steadily. Innovation scores, based on industry analysis of creative campaigns, had dropped significantly. Most tellingly, employee satisfaction surveys showed concerning trends around workplace culture and leadership effectiveness. For 3 years, I've watched and learned and documented. I've seen brilliant creative minds leave because their ideas were dismissed. I've watched talented account executives struggle to advance because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of executive material. I've observed as opportunity after opportunity was missed because leadership was too focused on maintaining the status quo. Elena Vasquez was studying the performance data with growing concern. These numbers are worse than I realized. Marcus, some of these trends represent serious strategic failures. Marcus's defensive response was immediate and predictable. Those numbers don't tell the whole story. We've maintained profitability, we've kept the company stable, and we've preserved the culture that makes Pinnacle special. What culture is that exactly? I asked, advancing to the next slide, which displayed employee exit interview data. The culture where talented people leave because they feel undervalued. The culture where creative ideas are dismissed based on who presents them rather than their merit. Or perhaps you mean the culture where employees are publicly humiliated in front of clients for not having the right breeding.
The reference to yesterday's incident sent a visible shock through the room. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of what had transpired, but unsure how it connected to this larger revelation. Thomas Wu looked between Marcus and me with dawning understanding. Yesterday's presentation with Technovate. That's what triggered this. Yesterday's presentation was simply the final confirmation of what I'd already determined, I replied. That under current leadership, this company will never reach its full potential because that leadership is more concerned with social hierarchies than business results. I clicked to the final slide of my presentation, which outlined Apex Strategic Holdings' intentions for Pinnacle Marketing Solutions moving forward. The plan was comprehensive, addressing everything from leadership restructuring to strategic expansion to cultural transformation. As majority shareholder, I'm proposing immediate changes to company leadership and strategic direction, changes that will position Pinnacle as a leader in the evolving marketing landscape, rather than a company clinging to outdated models. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the silent room. You can't do this. I've built this company from nothing. I've dedicated 15 years of my life to Pinnacle. You can't just waltz in here and destroy everything I've worked for. Actually, Marcus, I can, I replied calmly. And I'm not destroying anything. I'm saving it. Your 15 years of leadership have brought this company to the brink of irrelevance. The Apex investment 3 years ago wasn't just a capital infusion, it was a rescue operation. Patricia distributed another set of documents to the board members. You'll find detailed financial projections showing where Pinnacle would be today without the Apex investment. The company was 6 months away from bankruptcy when Ms. Rivera's capital saved. The room fell silent as board members reviewed the sobering financial reality. Without Apex Strategic Holdings' intervention, there would be no Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for Marcus to defend. Margaret Foster finally broke the silence. Natasha, assuming the board agrees with your assessment of current leadership issues, what exactly are you proposing? I returned to my seat at the head of the table, feeling the weight of the moment settling around us. I'm proposing that Marcus Blackwell be removed as CEO, effective immediately. I'm proposing that I assume direct leadership of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions as CEO, bringing Apex Strategic Holdings resources and strategic vision to bear on growing this company into what it should have become years ago. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Marcus's face had gone pale, while his brother David looked as if he'd been physically struck. Sandra Mills clutched her portfolio, as if it were a life preserver in stormy seas. But around the table, I could see different expressions on the faces of the actual board members. Elena Vasquez looked relieved, as if a burden she'd been carrying for months had suddenly been lifted. James Morrison was nodding slowly, his financial mind clearly appreciating the strategic logic of the proposal. Thomas Wu appeared energized by the prospect of more aggressive growth strategy. Margaret Foster, however, raised the question that needed to be addressed. Natasha, what you're proposing makes business sense, but it's also essentially a hostile takeover of a company you've been working inside for 3 years. Some people might question the ethics of that approach. It was a fair point, and one I'd anticipated. Margaret, you're absolutely right to raise that concern. Let me be clear about something. I never intended for things to unfold this. My original plan was to work within the existing structure, to gradually influence positive changes while maintaining my role as a strategic investor. I stood and walked to the window, overlooking downtown Denver, gathering my thoughts before continuing. But yesterday's incident showed me something I'd been trying to ignore. No amount of performance, dedication, or results would ever earn me respect from current leadership. Marcus made it clear that he sees me as fundamentally inferior, based on my background, not my capabilities. I turned back to face the room. At that point, continuing to work within the existing structure became impossible, not just for me personally, but for the good of this company and everyone who works here. Elena Vasquez leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. So yesterday's humiliation was the catalyst, but not the cause. Exactly, the performance data speaks for itself. The missed opportunities, declining client satisfaction, increasing employee turnover, these are systematic failures that require systematic solutions. Solutions that current leadership has proven unwilling or unable to implement. Marcus had been silent during this exchange, his face cycling through various emotions as he processed the reality of his situation. Finally he found his voice again. Even if everything you're saying is true, You can't expect the board to just hand over control of this company to someone who's been lying to us for 3 years. I haven't lied to anyone, Mark. I've been completely transparent about my qualifications, my performance, and my commitment to this company. The only thing I didn't disclose was information that wasn't relevant to my role as a senior account executive. James Morrison looked up from the financial documents he'd been reviewing. Actually, Marcus, from a fiduciary standpoint, the board has an obligation to consider what's best for shareholders. And if Natasha owns 67% of the company through Apex Strategic Holdings, the implication hung in the air, unspoken but perfectly clear. In a publicly traded company, majority shareholders wielded considerable power over leadership decisions. In this case, I wasn't just proposing changes. I was exercising rights I'd owned for 3 years. Thomas Wu addressed the elephant in the room. Natasha, assuming the board supports this transition, what happens to existing leadership? What happens to Marcus, David, and the others who've been resistant to change? It was the question I'd been dreading, because the answer would reveal whether I was truly the leader I claimed to be, or simply someone seeking revenge for yesterday's humiliation. That depends entirely on their willingness to adapt to a new organizational structure, I replied carefully. This company needs people who are committed to excellence over ego, collaboration over hierarchy, and results over politics. Anyone who can embrace those values has a place here. Marcus's brother David spoke for the first time since the meeting began. And if we can't embrace your values, what then? I looked directly at him, seeing not an enemy but a casualty of circumstances beyond his control. Then you'll receive generous severance packages and positive recommendations for positions that better match your management style. I'm not interested in punishing anyone, Dave. I'm interested in building the best marketing company in the region. The room fell silent again as everyone processed the magnitude of what was unfolding. In the space of an hour, the entire power structure of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions had been revealed as an illusion. The employees who thought they knew their company's hierarchy had been operating under completely false assumptions. The CEO who thought he controlled his domain had discovered he was essentially a middle manager in someone else's vision. Patricia Rodriguez consulted her watch and cleared her throat. We should probably move toward a formal vote. Ms. Rivera's proposal requires board approval, despite her majority ownership position. Alina Vasquez straightened in her chair, reassuming her role as senior partner. Before we vote, I think we should hear from Marcus. This is obviously a difficult situation, but you deserve the opportunity to respond to these allegations about your leadership. Marcus stood slowly, his earlier bluster replaced by something that looked like genuine reflection. For a moment, I wondered if he might surprise everyone by demonstrating the kind of introspection that could lead to real growth. Instead, he chose defiance. What I'm hearing in this room is a coordinated attack on 15 years of steady leadership by someone who's been secretly plotting against me from the day she walked through our doors. Marcus said, his voice gaining strength as he found his narrative. Natasha may have manipulated her way into ownership of this company, but that doesn't change the fact that she's been fundamentally dishonest with everyone she works with. The accusation stung, partly because it contained a grain of truth. I had been less than completely transparent about my background and motivations, but manipulation, dishonesty, Marcus, I've never misrepresented my qualifications, my performance or my dedication to this company, I replied evenly. I've worked longer hours, generated more client revenue, and contributed more innovative ideas than anyone else at my level. The only thing I didn't share was personal financial information that wasn't relevant to my job performance. Wasn't relevant. Marcus's voice rose. You've been conducting some kind of elaborate corporate espionage operation, gathering information to use against me, pretending to be something you're not. Margaret Foster intervened before I could respond. Marcus, with all due respect, that's not what we've heard described here. What we've heard is that a talented executive has been undervalued and ultimately humiliated by leadership that couldn't see past their own prejudices. Prejudices? Marcus looked genuinely offended. I don't have prejudices. I have standards. This company has always maintained certain standards of professionalism and cultural fit. The phrase cultural fit hung in the air like toxic gas. Everyone in the room understood exactly what he meant, and exactly why yesterday's confrontation had been inevitable. Alina Vasquez's expression hardened. Marcus, I think you should stop talking right now. But Marcus was beyond caring about political niceties or professional discretion. 3 years of frustration, confusion and growing insecurity were pouring out in a torrent of poorly chosen words.
I stand by everything I said yesterday. Natasha Rivera may be intelligent and hardworking, but she doesn't understand our clients' world. She doesn't speak their language. She doesn't share their values or their expectations. And now we're supposed to believe she's been secretly running the company the whole time. It's absurd. The silence that followed was profound. Every person in that room understood that Marcus had just confirmed every accusation I'd made about his leadership philosophy and his personal prejudices. James Morrison spoke first, his voice heavy with disappointment. Marcus, you just validated every concern about your leadership that's been raised in this meeting. Thomas Wu was more direct. You're talking about cultural fit and shared values as if they're business qualifications. That's exactly the kind of thinking that's been holding this company back. But it was Elena Vasquez who delivered the decisive blow. Marcus, in 40 years in this industry, I've learned that the most dangerous leaders are those who can't distinguish between personal comfort and business excellence. You've just demonstrated that you're one of those leaders. Marcus looked around the room, finally beginning to understand that his support was evaporating in real time. His brother David was staring at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Sandra Mills looked as if she wanted to disappear entirely. I think, Patricia Rodriguez said diplomatically, this might be an appropriate time for a brief recess before we proceed to the formal vote. But Elena Vasquez shook her head. No recess necessary. I'm prepared to vote now. One by one, the board members indicated their readiness to proceed. The moment of decision had arrived, and everyone in the room understood that whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just the future of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, but the professional fates of everyone present. I took a deep breath and prepared to discover whether 3 years of careful planning and patient execution would culminate in success or spectacular failure. The formal vote proceeded with the methodical precision of a corporate execution. Elena Vasquez, as senior partner, assumed the procedural role with the gravity the moment demanded. We're voting on the removal of Marcus Blackwell as Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, and the appointment of Natasha Rivera as Interim CEO, effective immediately. All those in favor of the motion, 4 hands rose in unison. Elena Vasquez, James Morrison, Thomas Wu, and Margaret Foster. The vote wasn't even close. Marcus's own board, the people who had worked alongside him for years, had unanimously decided his time was over. All opposed. Marcus raised his hand in a gesture that seemed more symbolic than hopeful. David Blackwell and Sandra Mills followed suit, but their opposition carried no weight. They weren't board members, merely observers to their own professional demise. The motion carries 4-1. Elena and Marcus Blackwell is hereby removed as CEO. Natasha Rivera is appointed interim CEO pending formal ratification at the next quarterly board meeting. The words seemed to echo in the conference room long after Elena finished speaking. Marcus remained seated, staring at the table as if the polished wood might reveal some path back to the authority he'd lost in the span of 90 minutes. I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness watching him process his defeat. This wasn't personal vindication I was experiencing. It was the weight of responsibility settling onto my shoulders. The fantasy of revealing my hidden power was giving way to the reality of wielding that power responsibly. Marcus, I said quietly, I know this is difficult, but I meant what I said about generous severance and positive recommendations. This doesn't have to be the end of your career. He looked up at me with eyes that held no gratitude, only bitter resentment. Don't patronize me, Natasha. You've been planning this from the moment you walked through our doors. At least have the dignity to own what you've done. Patricia Rodriguez intervened before the situation could escalate further. Mr. Blackwell, Rivera's legal team has prepared a comprehensive separation package that I think you'll find more than fair. Perhaps we could schedule a private meeting to review the terms. Marcus stood slowly, his movements carrying the weight of absolute defeat. Fine, but I want it on record that I believe this entire situation represents a fundamental betrayal of trust. You may have won, Natasha, but you've damaged something irreparable in the process. After Marcus, David and Sandra filed out of the conference room, the remaining board members and I were left to confront the magnitude of what had just occurred. The easy part was over. Now came the challenge of actually running a company through a period of dramatic transition. Thomas Wu was the first to break the silence. Natasha, I have to ask the obvious question. What's your actual plan here? Beyond removing Marcus, what's your vision for moving forward? I'd been preparing for this question for months, but articulating it in the wake of such dramatic change felt different than rehearsing it in my apartment. The marketing industry is evolving faster than most companies can adapt. We're seeing artificial intelligence reshape creative processes, social media platforms becoming primary advertising channels, and clients demanding integrated strategies that most agencies can't deliver. I moved to the presentation screen and pulled up a comprehensive strategic plan that represented hundreds of hours of research and analysis.
Pinnacle has been operating as if it's still 2015. Our service offerings, our technology infrastructure, our talent acquisition strategy, everything has been focused on preserving the past rather than embracing the future. Elena Vasquez studied the strategic framework with obvious interest. These expansion areas, influencer marketing, AI-assisted creative development, immersive brand experiences, this represents a significant departure from our traditional services. It represents survival, I corrected. Our biggest competitors aren't other traditional advertising agencies anymore. We're competing with tech companies, consulting firms, and specialized digital marketing startups that can offer clients capabilities we don't even understand. James Morrison, ever focused on the financial implications, asked the critical question. What kind of investment are we talking about? Technology upgrades, new hires, expanded office space. I clicked to the financial projections slide, revealing numbers I'd been refining for months. Apex Strategic Holdings is prepared to inject an additional $15 million in growth capital over the next 2 years. This investment will fund technology upgrades, strategic acquisitions of specialized firms, and recruitment of top-tier talent in emerging marketing disciplines. The number caused visible reactions around the table. Margaret Foster actually whistled softly. $15 million? That's more than our total revenue last year. It's an investment in becoming the kind of company that generates $50 million in annual revenue within 3 years, I replied. The marketing industry is consolidating. Companies that can offer comprehensive, cutting-edge services will dominate, everyone else will become irrelevant. Thomas Wu leaned forward, his entrepreneur's instincts clearly engaged. You're talking about transforming Pinnacle from a regional marketing agency into a major player in the digital marketing space. I'm talking about building the marketing company I wished existed when I was struggling to launch my own business 8 years ago, I said, allowing some personal passion to enter my professional presentation. A company that judges ideas by their merit, not by who presents them. A company that embraces innovation instead of fearing it. A company that creates opportunities for talented people regardless of their background or connections. The vision was ambitious, perhaps overly so. But looking around the table at these 4 accomplished professionals, I could see the spark of excitement that comes when successful people encounter a truly compelling opportunity. Elena Vasquez asked the question that would determine whether this transition succeeded or failed. What do you need from us? Beyond formal approval, how do we make this work? I need your expertise, your relationships, and your patience, I replied honestly. I've been studying this company for 3 years, but I've been doing it from an employee's perspective. There are aspects of senior leadership I'll need to learn quickly. I'll make mistakes, and I'll need a board that can provide guidance without micromanaging. Margaret Foster nodded approvingly. That's refreshingly honest. Most new CEOs pretend they have all the answers. I have some answers, I corrected. I have a clear vision, detailed plans, and the financial resources to execute them. But I also have enough humility to know that leading a company through major transformation requires collaborative effort. James Morrison was reviewing the financial projections with the scrutiny I'd expected. These growth targets are aggressive. What happens if we don't hit these numbers? Then we adjust our strategies and try again, I replied. But James, look at the market data. The marketing industry is growing at 15% annually. Companies that can offer integrated digital strategies are seeing growth rates of 30% or higher. Our projections aren't optimistic, they're realistic for a company willing to evolve. Thomas Wu stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Denver, his expression thoughtful. The West Coast expansion you're proposing, opening offices in San Francisco and Seattle, that's been on our strategic wish list for 5 years. Marcus always said it was too risky. Marcus was protecting a business model that was already becoming obsolete, I said. The West Coast expansion isn't risky, it's essential. That's where the innovation is happening, where the biggest clients are making decisions about their marketing strategy. If we're not present in those markets, we're invisible to the clients who will drive industry growth.
The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from hiring strategies to technology implementations to client transition plans. By the time we concluded the meeting, I felt cautiously optimistic that the board transition would be smoother than I'd anticipated. But boards were the easy part. The real challenge would come when I walked out of this conference room and faced the 137 employees of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, most of whom had no idea their world had just changed fundamentally. Patricia Rodriguez gathered her documents and prepared to leave for her office, where she'd spend the rest of the day drafting separation agreements and transition documents. Natasha, you should probably address the staff as soon as possible. News like this spreads quickly, and you want to control the narrative. She was absolutely right. By now, word of the emergency board meeting had certainly circulated throughout the office. Marcus's departure, however it was being interpreted, would create anxiety and speculation that could damage productivity and morale if not addressed immediately. I'll call an all-hands meeting for this afternoon, I decided. Give people time to process what's happening and ask questions directly. Elena Vasquez paused at the door. Natasha, one more thing. Yesterday's incident with the Technovate clients, have you been in contact with them since the meeting? I nodded. Sarah Chen called me yesterday evening. They're concerned about working with Pinnacle under current leadership, but they're willing to continue the relationship if they can work directly with me. And now they can. Elena smiled. It's ironic, isn't it? Marcus's attempt to undermine you with those clients may have actually secured their business for the long term. After the board members left, I remained in the conference room for several minutes, allowing the reality of my new position to settle in. 3 days ago, I'd been Natasha Rivera, senior account executive, driving to work in my Honda Civic and hoping my boss would recognize my contribution. Now I was Natasha Rivera, CEO of a marketing company I'd secretly owned for 3 years, responsible for the livelihoods of nearly 140 people and the success of dozens of client relationships. The transformation was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel Blackwell. Can we talk? Coffee this afternoon. I stared at the message for a long moment. Daniel was intelligent, hardworking, and genuinely talented. He was also Marcus's nephew, which meant our conversation would be complicated by family loyalty and personal relationships I couldn't fully understand. But he deserved honesty, especially given how his uncle's behavior had catalyzed everything that had just occurred. I texted back, Conference Room C at 2 p.m. We have a lot to discuss. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls, document reviews and strategic planning sessions. Patricia's legal team worked with remarkable efficiency to finalize Marcus's separation agreement, while I met with department heads to begin the delicate process of explaining the leadership transition without creating panic. Priya Patel, my assistant, had been fielding calls and managing my calendar with her usual competence, but I could see the questions in her eyes. She'd worked closely with me for 6 years, yet she was discovering that she didn't know me as well as she'd thought. Priya, I owe you an explanation, I said during a brief break between meetings. And an apology. She looked up from her computer with the expression of someone trying to solve a complex puzzle. I've been thinking about all the times you worked late, all the calls you took from clients that I never recognized, all the financial documents you reviewed that weren't related to your accounts. It makes sense now. I should have trusted you with the truth earlier, I admit. You've been more than an assistant. You've been a partner in everything I've accomplished here. You deserve to know what was really happening. Priya smiled, and I could see relief replacing confusion in her expression. Honestly, I'm just glad to understand fine. There were moments when I wondered if you were interviewing for other jobs or planning to leave. The secrecy was harder than the truth would have been. Her observation stung because it highlighted a fundamental flaw in my approach. By maintaining such strict confidentiality about my ownership, I'd created distance between myself and people who could have been valuable allies. Trust was a two-way street, and I'd been traveling it in only one direction. At 2 o'clock, I made my way to Conference Room C for what might be the most difficult conversation of the day. Daniel Blackwell was already there, sitting at the small table with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that mixed curiosity with apprehension. Thank you for meeting with me, he said as I sat down across from him. I have to admit, I'm struggling to understand what happened this morning. Daniel was 28, 3 years younger than me, with his uncle's sharp intelligence but none of his arrogance. He He joined Pinnacle 2 years ago after completing his MBA at Northwestern, and he'd earned his position through genuine merit rather than family connections. "What did your uncle tell you?" I asked, curious about how Marcus was framing the morning's events. Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "He said you've been conducting some kind of corporate espionage operation, that you manipulated your way into ownership of the company, and that you orchestrated his removal for personal revenge." I sipped my coffee, considering how to respond. Daniel deserved honesty, but he also deserved context that would help him understand the broader situation. "Your uncle isn't entirely wrong," I said finally. "I did conceal my ownership of this company for 3 years, and yesterday's incident did trigger my decision to reveal that ownership and assume direct control." Daniel leaned forward, his expression intense. "But that's not the whole story, is it?" "No, it's not." I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the history of Apex Strategic Holdings, the financial crisis that had brought me into Pinnacle's orbit, and my 3-year observation of the company's operations under Marcus's leadership. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding, to something that looked like disappointment, though whether in me or his uncle, I couldn't tell. "So you've been evaluating Uncle Marcus's performance for 3 years, he said when I finished. "And yesterday was just the final straw. Yesterday showed me that no amount of professional excellence would ever earn me respect from your uncle," I replied, "but more importantly, it showed me that his leadership philosophy was fundamentally incompatible with the company's long-term success." Daniel was quiet for several minutes, clearly processing information that challenged his understanding of both his family and his workplace. Finally, he looked up with eyes that carried a maturity beyond his years. "Uncle Marcus has always been difficult about people who don't fit his idea of executive material," Daniel said carefully. "I've watched him dismiss talented people for reasons that had nothing to do with their capabilities. I told myself it was just generational differences, but yesterday's performance was inexcusable." His acknowledgement of his uncle's flaws was both relieving and saddening. Daniel had clearly been aware of problems he'd felt powerless to address. "What happens now?" he asked. "With the company, I mean, and with people like me who are connected to the old leadership." It was the question I'd been dreading, because the answer would reveal what kind of leader I intended to be. "Vindictive or fair, focused on the past or the future, that depends entirely on you," I said honestly. "I've reviewed your performance records, Daniel. You're talented, hardworking, and respected by your colleagues. Your connection to Marcus doesn't define your value to this company." Daniel's relief was visible, but he pressed further. "And if I choose to stay, what would that look like?" I pulled out a folder I'd prepared that morning, containing organizational charts and job descriptions for the new structure I was implementing. "I'm creating a new position, Director of Strategic Development. It would involve leading our expansion into emerging marketing disciplines and managing relationships with the technology partners we'll be acquiring." Daniel reviewed the job description with obvious interest. The position represented a significant promotion from his current role, with responsibilities that would challenge his skills and expand his influence within the company. "This is a substantial opportunity," he said after reading through the details. "Why are you offering it to me?" "Because you've earned it," I replied simply, "and because I believe in judging people by their potential, not their connections." Daniel set down the folder and looked directly at me. "Uncle Marcus is going to see this as betrayal. Family loyalty is important to him." "Family loyalty is important," I agreed, "but it shouldn't come at the expense of personal integrity or professional growth. You have to decide what kind of career you want to build and what kind of person you want to be." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from reporting structures to salary adjustments, to the cultural changes I intended to implement. By the time we concluded, I felt confident that Daniel would choose to stay and contribute to Pinnacle's transformation, but his decision would be just one of many that would determine whether my vision for the company became reality, or remained an ambitious fantasy. At 4 o'clock I stood in front of the entire Pinnacle Marketing Solutions staff in our main conference area, looking out at faces that reflected curiosity, concern, and confusion in equal measure. These were the people who would ultimately determine whether my leadership transition succeeded or failed. "Good afternoon, everyone. I know there have been rumors and speculation about this morning's board meeting, so I wanted to address the situation directly." The room was absolutely silent, with every person focused intently on what I was about to say.
Effective immediately, I've been appointed CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Marcus Blackwell has agreed to step down to pursue other opportunities. The reaction was immediate and varied. Some people looked shocked, others appeared relieved, and a few seemed confused about how a senior account executive had suddenly become their CEO. I know this raises questions about my qualifications and background, I continue. What many of you don't know is that I'm the founder and CEO of Apex Strategic Holdings, the investment firm that owns the majority of this company. The second revelation caused even stronger reaction. Conversations broke out across the room as people processed this information and its implications for their own positions. I raised my hand for quiet. I understand this is a lot to absorb, and I want to address your concerns as directly as possible. Over the next week, I'll be meeting with each department to discuss our strategic direction and how these changes will affect your roles. A hand went up in the back of the room. Jennifer Walsh from the creative department. Natasha, why didn't you tell us who you really were? We've been working together for 3 years. It was a fair question that deserved an honest answer, because I wanted to understand this company from the ground up before making any major changes. I wanted to see how we really operated, what our strengths and weaknesses were, and what kind of culture we'd created. Another hand, this time from Michael Torres in account management. What does this mean for people who were close to Mark? Are we going to be punished for supporting the previous leadership? Absolutely not, I replied firmly. Your job security depends on your performance and your commitment to our clients, not on your relationship with previous management. I'm interested in moving forward, not settling score. The questions continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from job security to strategic direction to company culture. By the time we concluded, I felt cautiously optimistic that the transition would be smoother than I'd feared. But as I returned to my office, Marcus's former office, which still felt surreal, I understood that the real work was just beginning. Removing a CEO was dramatic and decisive. Building a successful company required sustained excellence over months and years. My phone was ringing as I sat down at the desk I'd inherited. Sarah Chen from Technovate Industries. Natasha, I heard some interesting news this afternoon. Something about changes in Pinnacle's leadership. I smiled, recognizing that our first major client relationship was about to become much more straightforward. Sarah, I think you're going to be very pleased with our new strategic direction. When can we schedule a meeting to discuss your campaign in detail? As evening approached and the office gradually emptied, I remained at my desk reviewing financial reports and strategic plans under the soft glow of the executive office light. 3 days ago, this had been Marcus Blackwell's domain, filled with his achievements and his vision of what Pinnacle Marketing Solutions should become. Tomorrow, it would begin transforming into something entirely different. A company built on merit rather than privilege. A company focused on innovation rather than tradition. A company where someone's background opened doors instead of closing them. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had spent 3 years trying to make me understand that I didn't belong in his world. Tomorrow, I would begin building a world where people like me didn't just belong, but thrived. The transformation was just beginning. 3 weeks into my tenure as CEO, the transformation of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions was proceeding faster than even my most optimistic projections had anticipated. The $15 million capital injection from Apex Strategic Holdings had already begun reshaping the company's technological infrastructure, while strategic recruitment efforts were attracting talent from major agencies across the country. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what had once been Marcus's corner office as I reviewed our latest client acquisition reports. Summit Advertising Group, our primary competitor, had lost 3 major accounts in the past 2 weeks. All 3 had cited concerns about Summit's ability to adapt to evolving marketing technologies and changing consumer behaviors. Those same 3 accounts were now sitting in our conference rooms, eager to discuss partnerships with Pinnacle's newly expanded service offering. Priya knocked on my doorframe, holding a tablet filled with the day's scheduling updates. The Technovate Industries team is here for their 10 o'clock strategy session. Sarah Chen specifically mentioned how impressed they are with our new creative direction. I smiled, remembering the dramatic contrast between this meeting and the catastrophic presentation that had triggered Marcus's downfall. Send them to the main conference room. I'll be right there. The Technovate relationship had become a cornerstone of our transformation strategy. What had started as a $100 million campaign opportunity had evolved into a comprehensive partnership involving brand positioning, digital strategy, influencer marketing, and emerging technology integration. Sarah Chen's team had become our testing ground for innovative approaches that were now being replicated across our entire client base. As I walked toward the conference room, I passed the expanded creative department, where 12 new hires were collaborating on immersive brand experiences, using virtual reality platforms. The energy in the space was palpable, with traditional advertising professionals working alongside tech specialists, data analysts, and social media strategists, in ways that would have been unimaginable under previous leadership. "Good morning, Sarah," I greeted the Technovate team as I entered the conference room. "I understand you've had a chance to review our latest campaign concepts." Sarah Chen's enthusiasm was immediately apparent. "Natasha, what your team has developed exceeded our expectations in every category. The integrated approach, the data-driven targeting, the creative innovation, this is exactly what we hoped to find when we started looking for a marketing partner." The presentation that followed showcased everything I'd envisioned when planning Pinnacle's transformation. Traditional advertising creativity enhanced by artificial intelligence, social media strategies informed by real-time behavioral analysis, brand experiences that seamlessly integrated digital and physical consumer interaction. Most importantly, the team presenting these concepts reflected the diversity of talent and perspective I'd been determined to cultivate. Jennifer Walsh, our newly promoted creative director, had assembled a team that included recent graduates from art schools, experienced professionals from tech companies, and creative specialists whose unconventional backgrounds brought fresh insights to traditional marketing challenges. "The demographic analysis is particularly impressive," noted Dr. James Patterson, Technovate's chief technology officer. "Your targeting algorithms identified consumer segments we hadn't even considered, and the projected engagement rates are substantially higher than industry averages." Daniel Blackwell, now 3 weeks into his role as Director of Strategic Development, stepped forward to address the technical implementation aspects. "We've partnered with 3 emerging technology companies to ensure we can deliver on these projections. Our beta testing has confirmed that the interactive elements generate 43% higher engagement than traditional advertising approaches." The transformation in Daniel had been remarkable to witness. Freed from his uncle's shadow and empowered to pursue innovative strategies, he'd revealed capabilities that had been suppressed under the previous leadership structure. His promotion had sent a clear message throughout the company that merit would be rewarded regardless of family connections or political consideration. After the Technovate team departed with signed contracts for an expanded partnership, I returned to my office to find Elena Vasquez waiting with quarterly financial reports and strategic updates. "The numbers are extraordinary," Elena said, spreading documents across my desk. "Revenue growth of 38% in 3 weeks. Client satisfaction scores have improved by 22 points. Employee retention has stabilized completely, and we're receiving unsolicited applications from top talent at competing agencies." I reviewed the financial data with satisfaction, but also with awareness that rapid growth created new challenges. "What about operational capacity? Are we able to deliver on all these new commitments?" Elena nodded toward a comprehensive staffing analysis. "We're hiring aggressively but strategically. The new recruits are integrating well with existing teams, and productivity metrics suggest we can handle current growth rates without compromising quality." The staffing transformation had been perhaps the most rewarding aspect of leading Pinnacle's evolution. By removing artificial barriers based on educational pedigree or social connections, we'd attracted talent that brought innovative perspectives and exceptional capability. The woman we'd hired to lead our influencer marketing division had started her career as a social media manager at a small nonprofit. Our new data analytics director had learned his skills through online courses while working as a restaurant server. Both were now delivering results that surpassed anything our previous traditionally credentialed staff had achieved. "What about the West Coast expansion?" I asked, reviewing timeline projections for our San Francisco and Seattle office opening. "Ahead of schedule," Elena replied with obvious satisfaction. "Thomas Wu has identified prime locations in both cities, and we've already received preliminary interest from several major tech companies who want to work with our expanded capability." The growth trajectory was exhilarating, but I remained conscious of the human costs that had made it possible. Marcus's departure had been handled with appropriate financial consideration, but the personal impact on him and his immediate allies had been significant. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Saw the article about Pinnacle in Marketing Weekly. Congratulations on your success. You've built something impressive.
Marcus's acknowledgement was unexpected and surprisingly gracious. Despite our contentious history and the dramatic nature of his departure, he seemed capable of recognizing what the company had achieved in his absence. I showed the message to Elena, who read it with raised eyebrows. "That's more mature than I expected from him." "People can grow," I replied, though I wondered whether Marcus's perspective had been influenced by the generous severance package or by genuine reflection on his leadership approach. My afternoon was dedicated to individual meetings with department heads, a weekly practice I'd instituted to maintain direct communication with the people actually executing our strategic vision. These conversations had become invaluable for identifying emerging challenges and opportunities that might not surface through formal reporting structures. Michael Torres from Account Management brought particularly encouraging news. 3 more agencies have reached out asking about potential acquisitions or partnerships. Word is spreading that Pinnacle has become the place to be for innovative marketing strategy. The acquisition opportunities represented exactly the kind of strategic growth I'd envisioned when developing our expansion plan. Rather than simply competing with other agencies for existing business, we were positioning ourselves to absorb talented teams and established client relationships that aligned with our evolving capabilities. "What kind of agencies are we talking about?" I asked, reviewing the preliminary information Michael had compiled. "A boutique digital strategy firm in Austin, with specialized expertise in tech startup marketing, a creative collective in Portland that focuses on sustainable brand development, and a data analytics company in Chicago that's developed proprietary consumer behavior tracking technologies." Each potential acquisition offered capabilities that would enhance our service offerings while bringing talented professionals into our expanding organization. The challenge would be integrating diverse company cultures and management approaches without losing the innovative energy that made each firm successful. Jennifer Walsh arrived for her meeting carrying portfolio samples that demonstrated the creative evolution occurring throughout our expanded department.
I wanted to show you some of the work our new team members have been developing. The collaboration between traditional creatives and technology specialists is producing campaigns that are genuinely unprecedented. The portfolio samples were impressive in ways that transcended typical advertising creativity. Interactive brand experiences that responded to consumer emotions, social media campaigns that adapted in real time based on engagement patterns, traditional print advertisements enhanced with augmented reality elements that created immersive consumer experiences. How are the existing staff members adapting to these new approaches? I asked, conscious that rapid technological integration could create anxiety among professionals whose expertise was based on traditional marketing methods. Jennifer smiled with obvious pride in her team's adaptability. "Better than I expected." The senior creatives are embracing the new tools because they expand their creative possibilities rather than replacing their skills. And the newer team members are learning traditional techniques that give their technological innovations more conceptual depth. The successful integration of diverse expertise levels had been one of my primary concerns when planning the department expansion. Traditional advertising agencies often struggled with generational and technological divides that prevented effective collaboration between experienced professionals and digitally native newcomers. By fostering an environment where different skill sets were valued equally, we'd created teams that leveraged both traditional marketing wisdom and cutting-edge technological capability. My final meeting of the day was with Patricia Rodriguez, who arrived with legal documents and strategic updates related to our continued expansion and competitive positioning. I've received inquiries from 2 major corporations about acquiring Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Patricia informed me with an expression that mixed excitement with concern. "The offers are substantial, but they would obviously end your independence." I reviewed the preliminary acquisition terms with interest but no serious consideration. "What kind of numbers are we discussing?" "Combined offers approaching $400 million. Both companies are interested in your technological integration capabilities and your talent acquisition strategy." The acquisition offers represented validation of what we'd accomplished in just 3 weeks, but they also highlighted the success that was attracting attention from much larger competitors. Independence versus financial opportunity was a decision that would ultimately define Pinnacle's long-term trajectory. "My inclination is to decline both offers," I said after reviewing the terms. "We're just beginning to realize our potential. Selling now would be like harvesting fruit before it's fully ripened." Patricia nodded approvingly. "I agree. The growth trajectory suggests that maintaining independence will ultimately generate much higher returns, both financially and strategically." As evening approached and the office began to empty, I remained at my desk reviewing strategic plans and financial projections that had become exponentially more complex since assuming direct leadership. The transformation from hidden owner to active CEO had revealed challenges I hadn't fully anticipated when planning this transition. Managing rapid growth required different skills than building investment strategy. Leading talented professionals demanded more nuanced interpersonal capabilities than analyzing corporate performance metrics. Balancing innovation with operational stability created tensions that hadn't existed when I was observing from the sidelines as a senior account executive. But the rewards were also more substantial than I'd imagined. Watching talented people flourish in an environment that valued their contributions regardless of their backgrounds was deeply satisfying in ways that financial success alone couldn't provide. My phone rang, interrupting my strategic planning session. Daniel Blackwell, calling from his new office where he'd been working late on expansion proposals for our West Coast operations. Natasha, I wanted to update you on the San Francisco office development. We've received preliminary interest from 6 major tech companies, including 2 that are currently working with our primary competitors. The West Coast expansion was proceeding even faster than our most optimistic projection. Silicon Valley's appetite for innovative marketing strategies appeared to align perfectly with Pinnacle's evolved capabilities. What kind of timeline are we looking at for full operational capacity? I asked, reviewing expansion budgets and staffing projections. Thomas Wu believes we can have both offices operational within 8 weeks. The real challenge will be recruiting qualified staff in those competitive markets. The staffing challenge was significant but not insurmountable. Our success in Denver had generated industry attention that was making recruitment easier than traditional approaches. Top marketing professionals were beginning to see Pinnacle as a destination for career advancement rather than just another agency opportunity. Daniel, before we conclude, I wanted to ask how you're feeling about everything that's happened. The transition has been dramatic for everyone, but especially complicated for you given the family dynamic. Daniel was quiet for a moment, clearly considering how to articulate complex emotions about his uncle's departure and his own expanded role in the company's future. Honestly, it's been liberating, he said finally. I spent 2 years trying to balance family loyalty with professional integrity. Working under Uncle Marcus meant constantly questioning whether my ideas were being evaluated fairly or dismissed because of internal politics. His candor was both refreshing and saddening. The previous leadership structure had wasted talent through prejudice and nepotism, preventing capable people from contributing their best work to the company's success. And now I feel like I'm actually building something meaningful. The strategic development role lets me contribute to genuine innovation rather than just maintaining existing relationships. It's the kind of work I hoped to do when I joined Pinnacle. After ending the call with Daniel, I spent another hour reviewing client communications and strategic planning documents before finally preparing to leave for the evening. The responsibilities of CEO were more demanding than I'd anticipated, but they were also more rewarding than I'd dared to hope. As I gathered my materials and prepared to lock my office, I paused to look around the space that had once represented Marcus's vision of corporate success. The mahogany furniture remained, along with the impressive view of downtown Denver's skyline. But the energy of the room had changed completely. Where Marcus's office had reflected individual achievement and social status, my workspace now buzzed with collaborative energy and strategic innovation. The walls displayed campaign samples from our diverse creative teams alongside technological integration diagrams and expansion timeline projections. The transformation wasn't just about changing leadership or improving financial performance. It was about creating an environment where talented people could pursue their best work without artificial limitations based on background, connections, or social expectations. Walking through the office on my way to the elevator, I observed the lingering evidence of extended work sessions and collaborative projects that extended far beyond traditional business hours. Our expanded teams were staying late not because they were required to, but because they were genuinely excited about the projects they were developing. The security guard, Miguel, greeted me with his usual friendly professionalism as I signed out for the evening. Another long day, Miss Rivera. This place has been buzzing with energy since the leadership changes. His observation confirmed what I'd been sensing throughout the building. The atmosphere at Pinnacle had shifted from dutiful compliance to genuine enthusiasm. People were investing emotional energy in their work because they felt valued and empowered rather than merely tolerated. As I drove through downtown Denver toward my apartment, I reflected on the unexpected turns that had brought me to this point. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a senior account executive hiding my true authority and enduring condescending treatment from someone who couldn't see past his own prejudice. Now I was leading a marketing company through the most successful transformation in its history, building the kind of workplace I'd wished existed throughout my career, and creating opportunities for talented people who might otherwise be overlooked by traditional corporate structure. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's public humiliation had ultimately liberated both of us from an unsustainable situation. His departure had freed him from the growing pressures of leading a company in an industry he didn't fully understand. My emergence as CEO had freed me from the exhausting performance of hiding my capabilities and accepting treatment that diminished my contribution. The transformation was far from complete, but the foundation had been established for continued growth and innovation that would reshape Pinnacle Marketing Solutions into something unprecedented in our industry. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Client presentations that could expand our market reach, recruitment decisions that would determine our cultural trajectory, strategic choices that would define our competitive positioning for years to come. But tonight I allowed myself the satisfaction of recognizing how far we'd traveled in just 3 weeks. From a traditional advertising agency struggling to remain relevant to an innovative marketing company that competitors were trying to acquire and talented professionals were eager to join. The girl from East Denver who had once been dismissed as lacking proper breeding had built something that transcended anyone's narrow definitions of corporate success. And tomorrow we would continue building it into something even more remarkable. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation that reshaped Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, I stood on the rooftop terrace of our newly opened San Francisco office, watching the sunset paint the Bay Area skyline in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The view was spectacular, but what filled me with deeper satisfaction was the sound of creative collaboration drifting up from the floors below, where teams were working on campaigns that would have been impossible under our previous leadership structure. The transformation had exceeded every projection I'd dared to make during those early strategic planning sessions. Pinnacle's revenue had doubled, client satisfaction scores reached industry-leading levels, and we'd become the preferred destination for marketing talent across the western United States. More importantly, we'd proven that companies built on merit rather than privilege could achieve extraordinary success while maintaining their principles. My phone buzzed with a message from Priya, who was coordinating the logistics for tonight's celebration. The Denver team is arriving at the airport now. Sarah Chen from Technovate just confirmed that their entire executive committee will be attending the dinner. This is going to be quite an event. Tonight's celebration marked the official opening of both our San Francisco and Seattle offices, but it also represented something more significant. It was an acknowledgement of how far we'd traveled from that humiliating conference room confrontation to building one of the most innovative marketing companies on the West Coast. The guest list read like a directory of influential figures in technology and marketing. CEOs from major corporations, venture capital partners, marketing directors from Fortune 500 companies, and talent from agencies across the country who were curious about our unconventional approach to business growth. What made tonight especially meaningful was that many of the people attending had initially been skeptical about our expansion plan. The marketing industry was notoriously conservative, with established players resistant to newcomers who challenged traditional approaches to client relationships and creative development. Our success had forced that industry to reconsider its assumptions about what effective marketing leadership looked like. Daniel Blackwell appeared beside me on the terrace, carrying 2 glasses of champagne and wearing an expression of quiet satisfaction. His transformation over the past 6 months had been remarkable to witness. The uncertain young executive who had once struggled to balance family loyalty with professional integrity had evolved into one of our most effective strategic leaders. Hard to believe this is the same company where I used to worry about expressing innovative ideas because they might be dismissed as too unconventional, Daniel said, gesturing toward the bustling office space visible through the floor-to-ceiling window. Innovation was always there, I replied, accepting the champagne. It just needed an environment where it could flourish without fear of judgment based on irrelevant criteria. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that conversation we had 6 months ago, when you offered me the strategic development position. I was terrified that choosing to stay would damage my relationship with Uncle Marcus permanently. And how do you feel about that choice now? Like it was the most important decision of my professional life, Daniel said without hesitation. Working here has taught me that real loyalty isn't about protecting people from the consequences of their actions. It's about supporting them in becoming the best versions of themselves. His insight reflected a maturity that had been suppressed under our previous leadership structure. By removing artificial constraints based on family connections and social expectations, we'd enabled talented people to develop capabilities they might never have discovered in more traditional corporate environments. Alina Vasquez joined us on the terrace, her expression mixing professional pride with personal satisfaction. The pre-dinner networking is generating some interesting conversations downstairs. 3 major corporations have approached me about potential partnerships, and 2 venture capital firms are asking about investment opportunities. The attention from investors was flattering but unnecessary. Pinnacle's growth had been entirely self-funded through strategic reinvestment of profits and the additional capital injections from Apex Strategic Holding. Our independence remained one of our most valuable assets, allowing us to pursue long-term innovation strategies without external pressure for quarterly profit maximization. Any particularly intriguing opportunity? I asked, genuinely curious about what kind of partnerships might enhance our capabilities without compromising our operational autonomy. Alina smiled with the expression of someone who had excellent news to share. Margaret Foster has been in discussions with a consortium of European marketing agencies about establishing international partnerships. Apparently, our reputation for innovative client strategies has spread beyond North America. International expansion had been on our long-term strategic radar, but much further in the future than current opportunities suggested. The marketing industry's globalization created opportunities for companies with distinctive capabilities to establish partnerships that could accelerate growth while sharing expertise across different markets. As evening approached, we made our way downstairs to the main event space where tonight's celebration was beginning to take shape. The venue buzzed with conversations between people who represented the evolving landscape of modern marketing. Traditional advertising executives mingled with tech entrepreneurs, social media strategists, collaborated with data analysts, and creative directors exchanged ideas with artificial intelligence specialists. The diversity of attendees reflected exactly the kind of integrated approach to marketing that had driven our success over the past 6 months. Sarah Chen from Technovate Industries approached me with several members of her executive team, all wearing expressions that suggested they had significant news to share. Natasha, I wanted to personally thank you for everything Pinnacle has accomplished for our brand positioning over the past 6 months, Sarah began. The campaign results have exceeded our most optimistic projections, but more importantly, you've transformed how we think about consumer engagement. Dr. James Patterson, Technovate's CTO, stepped forward with obvious enthusiasm. The integrated technology approach your team developed has become our model for all future marketing partnerships. We're recommending Pinnacle to other companies in our network because you've proven that innovative marketing can drive measurable business results. The testimonial was gratifying on multiple levels. Technovate had been the client present during Marcus's humiliating performance 6 months ago, and their continued partnership demonstrated how dramatically our client relationships had evolved under new leadership. What's particularly impressive, added Maria Rodriguez, Technovate's chief marketing officer, is how your team manages to balance creative innovation with strategic business objectives. That combination is rare in our industry. As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversations with marketing directors from companies across various industries, all curious about how Pinnacle had achieved such rapid growth while maintaining high-quality standards. The questions revealed industry-wide recognition that our approach represented something genuinely unprecedented. Thomas Wu approached me during a brief lull in the networking, carrying a folder that contained updates on our continued expansion plan. The Seattle office is ahead of every performance metric we established, Thomas reported with obvious satisfaction. Client acquisition, talent recruitment, project completion rates. Everything is exceeding projections by substantial margin. The Seattle success was particularly meaningful because it had been our riskiest expansion decision. The Pacific Northwest marketing market was dominated by established agencies with strong local connections, making it challenging for newcomers to gain traction with major clients. Our success there demonstrated that companies focused on delivering exceptional results could overcome traditional barriers based on regional relationships and established market positions. What about the Chicago expansion proposal? I asked, referring to our most recent growth opportunity. Thomas smiled with the expression of someone delivering excellent news. The acquisition negotiations with DataStream Analytics are proceeding smoothly. Their proprietary consumer behavior tracking technologies would enhance our service offerings significantly, and their team is excited about joining our collaborative approach to client development. The potential acquisition represented exactly the kind of strategic growth that had driven our success since assuming direct leadership. Rather than competing with innovative companies, we were incorporating their expertise into our expanding capabilities while providing their talented teams with resources and opportunities they couldn't access independently. Patricia Rodriguez appeared beside us, having just concluded a conversation with several potential clients who were expressing interest in our international marketing capabilities. I've been fielding inquiries about European market entry strategies all evening, Patricia informed us. Apparently, word of our success has reached companies that are looking for marketing partners who understand both American and international consumer behaviors. The international interest was unexpected but logical. Our diverse team composition and innovative technology integration had created capabilities that transcended traditional geographic limitations. Social media campaigns developed in Denver could be adapted for European markets, while consumer behavior analysis techniques could be applied across different cultural contexts. As the formal dinner portion of the evening began, I took my seat at the head table, looking out over a room filled with people who represented the future of marketing innovation. The diversity of attendees in terms of background, expertise, and perspective reflected the kind of inclusive approach that had driven our transformation over the past 6 months. Elena Vasquez stood to offer a toast that captured the significance of what we were celebrating. 6 months ago, many of us were working in an industry that valued connections over capabilities, tradition over innovation, and conformity over creativity, Elena began, her voice carrying throughout the event space. Tonight we're celebrating a company that has proven those limitations were artificial constraints that prevented talented people from achieving their potential. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and sustained, reflecting genuine appreciation for what Pinnacle had accomplished and what it represented for the broader marketing industry. What makes tonight especially meaningful, Elena continued, is that we're not just celebrating financial success. We're celebrating a workplace where people are valued for their contributions rather than their backgrounds, where innovative ideas are embraced rather than dismissed, and where professional growth is based on merit rather than politics. As Elena concluded her toast, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The path from that humiliating conference room confrontation to this celebration of industry leadership had been complex, challenging, and ultimately transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated when first revealing my ownership of Pinnacle. During the dinner, I found myself seated between Jennifer Walsh, our creative director, and Michael Torres, our account management leader. Both had been instrumental in implementing the cultural changes that had enabled our rapid growth, and their perspectives provided valuable insights into how our transformation had affected different aspects of the company. The creative freedom has been extraordinary, Jennifer shared between dinner courses. When people feel safe to propose unconventional ideas, the quality of creative work improves exponentially. Our campaigns are generating industry attention because they're genuinely innovative, rather than variations on established formulas. Michael nodded in agreement. Client relationships have evolved completely. When we focus on delivering exceptional results rather than managing political dynamics, clients respond with increased trust and expanded partnerships. The Technovate relationship is just one example of how authentic collaboration drives business growth. Their observations confirmed what I'd hoped would happen when implementing leadership changes based on merit rather than hierarchy. By removing artificial barriers to contribution and innovation, we'd enabled talented people to pursue their best work while building stronger relationships with clients who valued results over social connection. As the evening concluded and guests began to depart, many stopped to express appreciation for what Pinnacle represented in an industry that often struggled with inclusivity and innovation. The conversations revealed that our success had inspired other companies to reconsider their own approaches to talent development and client relationships. Daniel approached me as I was saying goodbye to the last departing guests, his expression mixing professional pride with personal gratitude. "I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity you gave me 6 months ago," Daniel said. "Working here has taught me that real professional success comes from contributing to something larger than individual advancement." His growth had been one of the most rewarding aspects of leading Pinnacle's transformation. By providing opportunities based on capability rather than connections, we'd enabled him to develop leadership skills that had been suppressed under previous management approaches. "You earned every opportunity through your performance," I replied. "The potential was always there. It just needed an environment where it could develop naturally." As the evening wound down and our teams began cleaning up the event space, I stepped back onto the terrace for a final look at the San Francisco skyline. The city lights sparkled like stars, each one representing dreams and ambitions that drove people to pursue extraordinary achievement. 6 months ago, I'd been a senior account executive hiding my true authority while enduring treatment that diminished my contributions. Tonight I was leading a company that had become a model for innovative marketing strategies and inclusive workplace practice. The transformation had required courage to confront prejudice, vision to imagine better alternatives, and persistence to implement changes despite resistance from established interests. But the results had exceeded every goal I'd established when first revealing my ownership and assuming direct leadership. More importantly, the success had created opportunities for talented people who might otherwise have been overlooked by traditional corporate structure. Our diverse teams were achieving results that homogeneous groups had been unable to match, while building client relationships based on authentic collaboration rather than superficial social connections. My phone buzzed with a text message that brought the evening full circle. Marcus Blackwell saw the coverage of tonight's event in Marketing Weekly. Impressive achievements. You've built something remarkable. His continued acknowledgement of our success demonstrated a capacity for growth that I hadn't expected during our confrontational departure 6 months ago. People were capable of evolving beyond their initial limitations, just as companies could transform beyond their original constraints. As I prepared to leave the San Francisco office and return to Denver, I reflected on the lessons that had emerged from our journey. Success wasn't about inheritance or connections or social status. It was about recognizing talent regardless of its packaging, embracing innovation despite its unfamiliarity, and building environments where people could contribute their best work without artificial limitation. The marketing industry had been forced to acknowledge that companies led by principles rather than prejudices could achieve extraordinary results while maintaining their value. Our success had proven that diversity wasn't just morally correct, it was strategically advantageous in markets that required innovative solutions to complex challenges. Most importantly, we demonstrated that respectful treatment of talented people wasn't just decent human behavior, it was essential business practice for companies that wanted to attract and retain the capabilities necessary for sustained excellence. The young woman who had once been dismissed as lacking proper breeding for executive relationships had built a company that redefined what executive excellence could look like. The girl from East Denver who had been told she didn't belong in elite business circles had created business circles that prioritized substance over style. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, client relationships to develop, expansion strategies to implement, and talented people to recruit for positions where they could flourish without constraints based on irrelevant social criteria. But tonight had proven that transformation was possible when people had the courage to challenge systems that limited human potential based on superficial characteristics, rather than genuine capabilities. The view from the top wasn't just about financial success or industry recognition. It was about the satisfaction of building something that created opportunities for others while proving that merit-based leadership could achieve results that traditional hierarchies had failed to deliver. 6 months ago, Marcus had tried to teach me about knowing my place. Tonight I'd shown him that sometimes the most important lesson is learning that your place is wherever your talents can create the most value, regardless of who thinks you belong there. Real power wasn't about putting people in their place. It was about creating places where people could discover their true potential. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.